Kia ora koutou. As we've heard many times through this conference, reforestation of Aotearoa involves ecological, spatial, economic and socio-cultural actors, all playing nicely on New Zealand's land of little landscapes. Our connections to trees and nature are vital to our survival. Now I'm going to throw to you some models of, hopefully show how we and trees fit into that ecocultural reality of convergent ecosystem and human salvation. You may be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of human needs and of chocolate. It starts with survival, progressing to physical connection and knowledge, transcending to an increasingly holistic, aesthetic, spiritual and altruistic awareness of the emergencies we face and how humanity is embedded in their resolution. My attempt at a parallel hierarchy of ecosystem biosphere needs and fulfilment is interwoven with this human revelation. The basic ingredients of bush restoration are the species and the environment at the base there. Whereas protection and regeneration are on a higher plane of priority and purity, safe, accurate restoration can emulate and seed natural ecosystem development. Importantly, engagement and getting your hands earthy as we proceed up the hierarchy builds knowledge of basic needs and the beginnings of reciprocity, which become increasingly revelatory as understanding digs deeper on many levels and ecological literacy converges with Indigenous wisdom and connectivity, finally settling into harmony with the universe, the planet, the biosphere, our place in it, and our identity. So, working up the hierarchy from the basics, my starting point is my hero, one of my heroes, Philip Grimes' stress disturbance framework, which helps us understand where different plant and tree strategies fit into the protection, management and restoration modes. Stress tolerators, should I try this? Up here, yes. Survive where in deserts where it's cold, dry, salty, acid, or otherwise stressed, very short, resistant vegetation. Rurals occur where it is grazed, mown, burnt, flooded, gardened or swept bare, taking us back in time from the last major disturbance over here. So the time line runs in reverse order from the degree of disturbance. Of course, most of our shrubby vegetation is mixtures of stress and disturbance, but where we have neither of these, we have forest, where competitors operate in dense bush, where there's just hasn't been much disturbance for a long time. Extreme drought stress is experienced by lichens on bare rock or bark. And drought-tolerant ferns and orchids eke out an existence in rock crevices here in humid Tamaki Makaurau. Disturbance after fire on cleared urban wastelands promote fast seeding and growth of herbaceous pioneers on the way back to forest. Grazers and mowers hold grass competition at bay, at least as far as the swan can reach, allowing light to the ground for flat weeds and buttercups. Well, Fiona's going to cover facilitating regeneration in a little while, but inevitably involves one of my other heroes, Hugh Wilson, the hero of minimum interference management. I only just mention here a couple of my cautions with respect to using exotic nurseries, and that is we do no harm to anything that's pre-existing there by allowing, say, gorse to grow. We accept that any pre-existing nature, whether it's native or exotic, will modify the trajectory, and we absolutely need to exclude exotic mammals and fire in order for that procession to occur. Direct seeding is akin to regeneration, but New Zealand flora is a bit slow. Timing is critical. Unless we can suppress the exotic grasses through cultivation, herbicides, blankets and sheep grazing with unpalatables, and we don't have many options there, Manuka, Kānuka, Tauhinu. And then we can sort of take out the sheep and let regeneration occur. In landscapes that are devoid of natural seeding sources, then we're left only with the planting option. Species selection, timing and good practice are vital. We've heard a lot about right plant, right place. Well, we actually have a plant selector tool which adds another dimension, that is right time. For all or any restoration and landscape occasions in Aotearoa, it involves 1,000 species times 100 elements, and the first step is to just zoom and click the map to generate the ecological region, the soil and the soil order filters. We then can determine whether our moisture levels in the ground are broadly wet, dry or in between, and then choose one of 10 environmental situations. In this case, I've picked the bush restoration with hill elements option. We then choose from that option that pops up a profile diagram of that particular situation and choose the specific element and generate a species list which provides their characteristics, their tolerances, spacings, ecosystem services, and importantly the staging. That's where the time comes in. Stages 1 to 2 over the first 5 years or so, and in 10 to 20 years we have species, the structural species forming a dense dark canopy, a frame with the beginning of light gaps which we might accelerate if we wish to manage that to speed up the process. And importantly, what hasn't dispersed, regenerated or colonised by that stage, we can then facilitate through enrichment or stage 3 planting of ground covers, vines, epiphytes, mycorrhizae, bringing in logs, animal translocation, etc. After about 20 to 30 years from our experience, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this, we see ecosystem self-actualisation right up at the top of that hierarchy of ecosystem needs and fulfilment. Our noble trees are taking off. Our deeper connections and understanding are also dawning. This is really a blissful moment, not only for the forest, but for us planters to see these tōtara, kahikatea, pōkāka seedlings starting to establish in our planted situations. It's really a case of the future unfolding. Of course, we're always reminded of the existential dangers posed by pest plants and animals, always threatening to go from incremental to exponential and undermine our mahi with nature. As David Norton pointed out yesterday, we can't relax until we've got 0 pest levels in the country. But it also, we're also evolving integrated recombinant fusion ecosystems, where safe ecosystem exotics of value coexist with critical visual prominence of our unique natural and associated cultural heritage. We contemplate the translocatables to replace maybe domestic cats, dogs and exotic birds with indigenous companion species. Wouldn't it be much better to have a pet kakapo than a dog or a cat? Initially, at least, these are going to be in sanctuaries that drive that human transformation, as Zealandia has so well demonstrated. It brings the whole community along. Okay. Well, at this point, we seem to be reaching a higher level in that hierarchy of transcendence, those light bulb moments towards thinking like a Matai with connectivity all around. The accessible, fenced sanctuaries become a metaphor for the complexity of our biosphere, our village, and our lives, to cherish, protect, and use respectfully. We scale up from habitat restoration to the landscape patch corridor network based on the empirical evidence of effective Matai dispersal by Kereru into exotic canopies, in fact, which restore ecological and socio-cultural halos across the matrix between those patches and from stepping stone to stepping stone patches. We have large sanctuary patches, as we've described, but also we can do so much in our own backyards where we have tiny forests, or even smaller predator-proofed roof garden oases for micro-wildlife. These are all part of a functional landscape, joined by native corridors that provide and connect the fruits and nectar our wildlife crave, not craze, they're crazy without it, along streets, railways, and along streams and hedges, and importantly at portals. We go from these relatively sterile, juvenile landscapes and redream a more mature countryside of integrated nature and production and human connectivity. Visibility is a key to conservation and placemaking, which eliminates that extinction of experience of our roots that many of us, at least older people in the audience, grew up with, a complete obliteration of visible nature in our cultural landscapes. We create a legible landscape in which our history unfolds before us on our deepening journey through Aotearoa, marked by art, meaning, information, and spiritual connection. We embrace our place where we stand, our turanga waiwai, in the biosphere, when we think and live like a Matai, slowly breathing, collaborating, reconciling, co-designing our way through the wicked problems descending on us. Transcendent revelation arrives when human spirit and ecosystem Māori seamlessly converge and interweave. When we discover we humans and ecosystems have a common destiny, when we are running out of time to achieve, we are running out of time to achieve the ecological literacy we need and the deeper fulfilment and connection with nature and trees, rather than the insatiable questing of material gratification and unsustainable confiscations from Papatūānuku. We have to live with nature, the ecosystem, and circular sustainability with our people within the village. Co-leadership from all of us here, promoted to our political leaders of all parties, is crucial to make this the consensus conversation, to revere and grow trees as a symbol of a much bigger picture of humanity communing with and understanding nature. If I just come back to the theme of envisioning the future, I see that our needs and fulfilled futures are inextricably shared with trees and transcendent nature. And I think that's my main message, is about how we kind of grow together with the ecosystems of the planet and find our place, our turanga wawe. Kia ora. Oh, gosh.
We've got time for a few questions. Yeah, you did very well. This is for you.
Thank you.
First question, which has come through on Slido. How do I get a pet kakapo?
Could we ask the Minister of Conservation?
Someone write that down for her, Eric, will you ask?
That's right. Yes.
Colin, oh, no, if you've got an answer.
Yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
But I have to say that my first encounter with a kakapo on Rakiura with Hugh Wilson was a transformational experience, staring into the eyes, dreamy eyes of that beautiful creature, completely unaware that it was an endangered species. You know, I want to have everyone experience that.
I really echo that. You mentioned a couple of times think like a Matai. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean when you say that?
Yes. Well, I actually wrote a chapter of a book in this book, The Tree Sense, edited by Suzette Goldsmith, Massey University Press, which entitled Think Like a Matai. and really it was a revelation as I was writing it, because it was really about the importance of slowing down. We all need to slow down. We need to breathe. We need to watch the journey and absorb it and learn from it and embrace it. and really, a matai tree is such an amazing metaphor for this, because it starts off like a pile of dead twigs and sits there forever, it seems, and eventually becomes a giant of the forest in 1,000 years or whatever. So, I mean, I see it as a kind of a metaphor for, you know, how we need to contemplate the place that we're in and how we need to absorb that thinking and that sort of ecological literacy that builds up with it.
Got another question coming through, Colin. Where native forests cannot perform economically to force land use change, surely a mixed model with legislated intention to transition out exotics would work?
Yes, and I think Fiona will perhaps talk about this a little bit later, about the transitioning from exotic nursery environments through to native species. I mentioned a couple of cautions there about, you know, the fact that that will change the trajectory, though the nature of those nursery situations. But in many cases, that's our only option. Much of our landforms are already highly modified. And so however we get nature sort of take off and build itself and find its own sort of self-actualisation, I think is relevant.
Awesome. Got another one. Colin, what do you see as the fundamental obstacles to creating 100,000 hectare new native regeneration across Canterbury within 5 years? Do you think we need more bold ambition?
Well, I and some of my colleagues here are part of the Te Ara Kakariki project, which is kind of, in fact, doing this within the Selwyn district, and we see potentially extrapolating this to the other districts of the Canterbury Plains. And it basically involves creating green dots at those critical spacings as demonstrated in that landscape model that I showed, from the mountains to the sea to Te Waihora. And we're sort of, we've created about 120 of those dots already on both private and public lands, and we're in the process of developing a big sort of legacy patches as well, which will create that kind of those sanctuary source environments as well as those smaller stepping stones. So we do have a model, and I think that model can be extrapolated to other highly modified environments and landscapes.
Cool. We've got time for one more question. Colin, how do we manage the weed tree species in regeneration, or are they part of the carbon process?
There are going to be some exotic species. I mean, we have around 30,000 exotic plant species in New Zealand. Many of them we're going to have to coexist with. Some of them are desirable and we want them. Others we need to really get on top of as fast as possible. We don't have time to waste. It's like many of these other emergencies. Some of them are increasing incrementally, but we see them taking off to an exponential level. Wilding conifers, sycamore, ivy, holly, we can think of a whole lot of examples. And we've really got to seriously take that, and local regional councils and other agencies need to be putting resources into doing that, and getting more, of those, jobs for nature sort of on out into the wild there, and getting rid of those seed sources. Yep.
Awesome, Colin. Thank you. That's all we've got time for from you. Round of applause for Colin.